Liam thought he knew the exact shape and weight of betrayal. He believed it was a brittle blackened thing, a curl of ash that had once been paper, floating away on the manicured lawn of the Hartwell estate. For 10 years he had carried the memory of that moment, the scent of accelerant, the hiss of flame, the sight of his wife, Chloe, her face illuminated by the tiny cruel fire she had made of his father's last words. Within hours, that act would set the tone for a decade of quiet humiliation. What Chloe didn't know, what she could never have imagined, was that the letter she burned was a ghost, a copy, a test, and the real letter, the one that held the keys to his past and her future, had been waiting patiently for this very day. If you've ever felt like your true worth was being overlooked, or if you've ever had to bite your tongue while someone else took credit for your quiet efforts, then you know a little of what Liam felt for 10 years. We'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment below and let us know what city or country you're in. Your support means everything, so if you enjoy this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales of patience, justice, and the moment everything changes. Now, let's go back to the day it all began. The wedding had been an exercise in performative opulence. It wasn't Liam's wedding, not really. It was the wedding of Chloe Hartwell, daughter of the real estate magnate Richard Hartwell, and it was designed to be a statement. The flowers alone cost more than the car Liam was driving at the time. Guests with names he only recognized from financial journals milled about, their conversations a low hum of mergers and market shares. Liam, a junior architect with a quiet portfolio and a heart full of love for the woman, shimmering in white beside him, felt like a well-dressed footnote in his own life story. His father had passed away 6 months prior. A quiet, unassuming man, a retired civil engineer who had always taught Liam that the strength of a structure was in its foundation, not its facade. The letter was his father's wedding gift, handed to him by the family lawyer, Arthur Pembroke, the day before the ceremony. Your father was very specific, Arthur had said, his eyes kind but serious. He wanted you to read this with your new wife on your wedding day, together. The envelope was simple, cream-colored, with his name written in his father's familiar steady script. It felt heavy in his hand, weighted with unspoken sentiment. He'd imagined the contents 1,000 times, words of love, of advice, a final blessing. He cherished it before he even knew what it said. The moment came after the cake had been cut, and the champagne towers were nearly depleted. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the lawn. Liam, feeling a surge of hopeful sentimentality, took Chloe by the hand and led her to a quiet stone bench near a sprawling oak tree. "What is it, darling?" she asked, her voice a little thick from the champagne, her smile bright but impatient. She was already looking back toward the music, the laughter, the gravitational pull of her own party. "I have something," Liam said, his voice soft. "From my father. He wanted us to read it together." He pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket. It felt sacred. Chloe looked at the simple envelope, then back at his earnest face. A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed her features. "Liam, really? Now? My father is about to give the final toast. It will only take a moment," he pleaded gently. "It was his last wish for me, for us," she sighed, a theatrical exhalation of a woman tolerating an inconvenience. She took the envelope from him. Her manicured fingers, the nails painted a pearlescent white, traced the edge. She didn't open it. Instead, her eyes scanned the crowd, landing on her father, Richard, who was holding court by the marquee. Richard caught her eye and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Liam saw the exchange. A cold knot began to form in his stomach. Chloe's expression hardened. The soft, bridal glow was replaced by a cool, calculating look he had never seen before. "You know, Liam," she said, her voice dropping its saccharine edge, "we're starting a new life now. A Hartwell life. It's about the future, not the past. We can't be weighed down by sentimentality." Before he could process the shift, her actions outpaced his understanding. From her tiny, glittering clutch, she produced a sleek, silver lighter, a gift, he knew, from one of her father's business associates. With a flick of her thumb, a sharp blue flame leaped into the twilight. "Chloe, no," Liam whispered, the words catching in his throat. He reached for the letter, but she was too quick. She held it just out of his reach, the flame dancing near the corner of the envelope. "My father says you have to burn the old bridges to build new, stronger ones," she said, her voice a chillingly calm murmur. Her eyes, fixed on his, were glittering with a strange, triumphant light. "This is our new foundation, Liam, unburdened." And then she touched the flame to the paper. The corner caught, turning brown, then black, before erupting into a small, hungry orange flower of fire. Liam stared, paralyzed, as the flame consumed his father's handwriting, as it devoured the potential words of love, of wisdom, of connection. He could smell the acrid smoke, a foul perfume that would haunt his memory. Chloe held it until the last possible second, her face a mask of serene determination before dropping the burning remnants onto the grass. The ash, a fragile black skeleton of what had been, crumbled and scattered in the evening breeze. He looked at her, his heart a splintered thing in his chest. The woman he had just pledged his life to had, with a casual flick of her wrist, incinerated his last connection to his father. She looked back, her expression not of apology but of expectation. She was waiting for him to understand, to agree, to admire her decisiveness. "There," she said, as if she had just tidied a messy room. She tucked the lighter back into her clutch. "All clean. Now come on, Daddy's waiting." She stood, smoothed her dress, and held out her hand, expecting him to take it and follow. In that moment, the first brick of a 10-year wall was laid in Liam's heart. He looked at her outstretched hand, then at the black smudge on the grass, then back at her smiling, confident face. And for the first time but not the last, he swallowed his pain, composed his features into a mask of placid acceptance, and followed his wife back to the party. He did not know then that Arthur Pembroke, a man of profound foresight and loyalty to his father, had given him a copy. He did not know the real letter was safe in a vault, waiting for the day he was ready to read it. All he knew was the hollow ache of what he had just lost, and the chilling realization that the woman he had married was a stranger. The decade that followed the wedding was a masterclass in subtle psychological warfare, waged so skillfully by Chloe and her father that Liam often felt like a man going mad in a perfectly sane world. To the outside observer, their life was idyllic. They lived in a sprawling, modernist home that Liam himself had designed, a fact Chloe often mentioned at parties, framing it as a quaint hobby she had graciously allowed him to indulge. "Liam is so creative with his little blueprints," she would say, a patronizing hand on his arm, her smile as bright and sharp as broken glass. "It's wonderful. He has something to keep him busy." The little blueprints were in reality Liam's life's work. He ran a small, independent architecture firm, Phoenix Legacy Designs, a name he chose on a whim after the wedding, inspired by the ashes on the lawn. He specialized in sustainable, community-focused projects, library, small clinics, public parks. His work was critically acclaimed in niche architectural journals, but generated modest income compared to the colossal, mountain-moving deals of Hartwell Properties. This disparity was a constant source of condescension. Family dinners were the primary battlefield. They were held every Sunday at the Hartwell estate, a monolithic mansion that seemed designed to remind everyone of Richard Hartwell's immense success and influence. Richard would sit at the head of the vast mahogany table, a modern-day king surveying his court. "So, Liam," Richard would begin, the same opening gambit every week, after ostentatiously sampling the wine, "what little shacks are you cobbling together for the birds this week?" He'd chuckle, a deep, rumbling sound that always found an echo in Chloe's light, tinkling laughter. "We just broke ground on the new wing for the Children's Hope Center." "Richard," Liam would reply, his voice even, his gaze steady. He learned early on that any emotional response, anger, frustration, defensiveness, was exactly the fuel they craved. Calm was his shield. "Ah, charity work," Richard would scoff, waving a dismissive hand. "Noble, I suppose. But it doesn't pay the bills, does it, son? Good thing my Chloe has you covered." He would wink at his daughter, who would preen under his approval. "You married up, my boy, never forget that." The truth, a secret Liam kept locked away as securely as his father's real letter, was that his firm was doing far more than paying the bills. The small, community-focused projects were his passion, but they were also a clever front. His father, the simple civil engineer, had been a prodigiously gifted and secretive investor. He had built a fortune not in concrete and steel, but in stocks, bonds, and prescient tech investments. This fortune, now managed by Liam through a series of trusts and holding companies guided by Arthur Pembroke, was growing exponentially. Phoenix Legacy Designs was the public face, the humble shell concealing a financial powerhouse. The profits from his little projects were a drop in the ocean compared to the dividends and capital gains that flowed silently into his accounts. Liam lived a double life. At home, he was the gentle, slightly ineffectual husband, the kept man who was grateful for the scraps of respect tossed his way. He drove a sensible sedan, wore off-the-rack suits to family functions, and never contradicted Chloe's extravagant spending. When she bought a new sports car on a whim, he would simply say, "It's a beautiful color, honey." When she redecorated their already perfect living room for the third time in 5 years, hiring a decorator who charged a fee that could fund one of his libraries, he would only nod and agree that the new shade of grage was very calming. This quiet acquiescence was interpreted by Chloe and Richard as weakness, a confirmation of their superiority. They didn't see it as the strategic camouflage it was. Every condescending remark, every dismissive gesture, every casual humiliation was a piece of data Liam collected. He stored them away, not out of malice, but out of a need for clarity. He was building a case in the quiet courtroom of his own mind, trying to understand if there was anything left of the woman he thought he'd married. One year, for their 5th anniversary, Liam spent months designing and handcrafting a beautiful mahogany jewelry box. He carved their initials into the lid, intertwined in a design that mirrored the branches of the oak tree where his father's letter had been burned. It was an olive branch, an attempt to reclaim that spot in that day, to build something beautiful from the ashes. Inside, he placed a simple silver locket, a stark contrast to the diamonds Chloe usually wore. He presented it to her over a quiet dinner at home, one he had cooked himself. She opened it with a polite, distracted smile. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "It's rustic." She picked up the locket and let it drop back into the box with a small, tinny clatter. "That's very sweet of you, Liam." A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. A delivery man stood there with a long velvet box. Chloe's eyes lit up. "Daddy," she exclaimed. She tore it open to reveal a diamond tennis necklace, so brilliant it seemed to suck the light from the room. She clasped it around her neck, ran to a mirror, and squealed with delight. "Isn't it magnificent? He knows me so well." The handcrafted box Liam had poured his heart into sat forgotten on the table, a silent testament to the vast gulf between their values. Liam felt a familiar pang, a dull ache of disappointment, but it was overlaid with a new, colder feeling, certainty. He was observing a system, a set of unbreakable rules. In the Hartwell universe, value was a number, love was a transaction, and sentiment was a liability. He cleared the table, placing the jewelry box on his desk in his study. It would stay there for the next 5 years, a constant, tangible reminder. His secret work was his sanctuary. In his study, late at night when Chloe was asleep or out with her friends, the mask of the mild-mannered architect would fall away. He would log into encrypted portals, his face illuminated by the glow of stock tickers and complex financial models. He wasn't just a passenger on the ship his father had built. He was at the helm. He studied markets, he made calculated risks, he diversified. He learned the language of power that Richard Hartwell spoke, and he became fluent in it. He used his growing hidden influence for good. He anonymously endowed scholarships at his alma mater. He set up a foundation that provided seed funding for sustainable building startups. When a small town's library was threatened with closure, a mysterious last-minute donation would arrive from a shell corporation named after his father's favorite dog. He was building a different kind of legacy, one based on his father's principles. Build a strong foundation, work quietly, and let the structure speak for itself. During this time, the original letter remained in the vault at Arthur Pembroke's law firm. Liam visited it once a year, on the anniversary of his father's death. He would sit in the quiet, wood-paneled room, and Arthur would place the cream-colored envelope on the table. Liam would just look at it. He never tried to open it. "The conditions are still in place, Liam," Arthur would say gently on each visit. "Your father's instructions were absolute. You read it when you are ready to act on its contents, when you are certain about your foundation." "I'm not ready, Arthur," Liam would reply each year. "The structure is still settling." He knew the letter contained more than just words. His father had hinted at it in their final months together. It was about a moral inheritance as much as a financial one. It was a final test of character for him and for the partner he chose. Chloe had failed the test on day one. The question that haunted Liam for 10 years was whether she was capable of ever understanding why. He continued to watch, to wait, to build his silent, invisible fortress, brick by patient brick, waiting for the day when the facade of their lives would finally, irrevocably crack. The catalyst for the final act arrived, as it so often did, in the form of Richard Hartwell's ego. It was the summer of Liam and Chloe's 10th anniversary, and Richard was consumed by a new grandiose vision. He had recently acquired a vast tract of rolling hills and pristine woodland about an hour outside the city, a property he'd wrested from a competitor in a typically aggressive takeover. He didn't just want to build a subdivision. He wanted to build a dynasty. "The Hartwell Legacy Estates," he announced one Sunday, his voice booming across the mahogany table. He unfurled a massive topographical map, pinning the corners down with a gravy boat and a silver salt shaker. Not just houses, a community. An equestrian center, a golf course designed by a pro, a private clubhouse that will make the old city club look like a public toilet. Chloe clapped her hands together, her eyes shining. "Daddy, it's brilliant. It's you in land form." Richard beamed, soaking in the adoration. "It's us, darling. It's for the future. For the Hartwell name to echo through these valleys for a century." He then turned his gaze to Liam, a glint in his eye that Liam had learned to recognize. It was the look of a man about to ask for a favor he considered a command. "And you, Liam," he said, pointing a thick finger at him. "You can be part of this. My architects are all corporate drones, no vision. They design boxes. I want something Organic, something that looks like it grew out of the land itself. He paused for dramatic effect. I want you to do the preliminary designs for the main residences. Give me that artistic flair of yours. Liam remained silent, his face a carefully composed mask of neutrality. This was different from the usual mockery. This was a request for his professional skill, the very thing they usually belittled. But he knew the subtext. It wasn't a commission. It was a conscription. Of course he'll do it, Daddy. Chloe chimed in, not even looking at Liam for confirmation. Won't you, darling? It'll be an honor for you. Your biggest project yet. The phrase biggest project yet hung in the air, thick with condescension. To them, his award-winning libraries and community centers were insignificant. This, designing McMansions for Richard's monument to his own vanity, was the pinnacle of what he could hope to achieve. I'd be happy to discuss a formal proposal, Richard, Liam said, his voice level. We can talk about scope, timelines, and my firm's standard fees. Richard let out a short barking laugh. Fees? Son, this is family. This is your chance to finally play in the big leagues. You do this for me, for the family, and I'll make sure everyone knows a Hartwell son-in-law designed the homes. The exposure will be worth more than any fee your little company could dream of. It was the ultimate insult, wrapped in the guise of an opportunity. Work for free. Be grateful for the privilege of adding value to my project. Your time, your talent, your expertise, they have no intrinsic worth. Their value is derived only from their proximity to me. Think of it, Liam, Chloe urged later that night as they prepared for bed. She was tracing the lines of the proposed estate on a brochure Richard had given them. You and Daddy, working together. You could learn so much from him. He could finally see what you're capable of. He wants me to work for free, Chloe, Liam stated simply. Watching her in the mirror, she turned her expression one of genuine bewilderment. Don't be so transactional, Liam. This isn't about money. It's about family. It's about legacy. Why must you always think in such small terms? The irony was so profound it was almost breathtaking. She, who had never known a world not defined by money, was accusing him of being transactional. He, who was secretly managing a fortune that could buy and sell her father's company several times over, was being told he thought in small terms. He felt a click in his mind, the sound of a final gear locking into place. For 10 years he had been an observer. Now, it was time to be an architect, not just of buildings, but of events. He saw the path forward with perfect, crystalline clarity. Richard's project, his monument to ego, would be the stage. The 10th anniversary party would be the overture. And he, the quiet, underestimated son-in-law, would be the conductor. You're right, Liam said, his voice so soft she had to lean in to hear it. You're absolutely right. It's an incredible opportunity. I'll start on the sketches tomorrow. Chloe's face flooded with relief and triumph. She kissed him, a quick, proprietary peck on the cheek. I knew you'd see it my way. You just need a little push sometimes. She turned back to the brochure, her mind already populating the fictional estate with her friends, her horses, her life. Liam watched her for a moment longer, then went into his study and closed the door. He sat at his desk, the mahogany jewelry box, dark, solid shape in the periphery. He didn't open his drafting software. He didn't pull out any paper. Instead, he picked up the phone and made a call. Arthur, he said, when the old lawyer answered. It's Liam. I need you to start preparing the paperwork. There was a pause on the other end of the line. All of it? Arthur asked, his voice heavy with unspoken meaning. All of it, Liam confirmed. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, a man he barely recognized yet knew intimately. And Arthur, I think it's time I schedule an appointment to read my father's letter. In the weeks that followed, Liam threw himself into a fever of activity, a quiet storm of preparation that went completely unnoticed by his wife and father-in-law. On the surface, he was the model of compliance. He spent hours in his study, the door often open, allowing Chloe to see him bent over a large drafting table, sketching elegant, sprawling homes that perfectly matched Richard's opulent vision. He produced beautiful watercolor renderings of the proposed Hartwell legacy estates, complete with rolling green lawns and contented, wealthy-looking figures strolling along stone pathways. Oh, Liam, these are wonderful, Chloe would exclaim, peering over his shoulder. I knew you had it in you. Daddy is going to be thrilled. Richard was more than thrilled. He was smugly satisfied. He treated the designs as his due, a rightful tribute. See, he'd say to Chloe over the phone, his voice loud enough for Liam to overhear. I told all he needed was a real project to sink his teeth into. A little Hartwell ambition is rubbing off on him. They were so blinded by their own narrative of his inadequacy that they couldn't see the truth. The designs were a smokescreen. For every hour Liam spent sketching their fantasy, he spent 3 hours on the phone with Arthur Pembroke and a team of financial analysts and lawyers he had quietly assembled. The work was meticulous, methodical. It was an architectural project of a different kind, building a case instead of a house. They traced the labyrinthine network of Richard Hartwell's finances. They found the over-leveraged loans, the risky ventures propped up by shaky collateral, the reliance on a handful of key lenders. Richard's empire, so formidable from the outside, had a foundation not of solid rock but of sand. And Liam, through the vast anonymous investment portfolio his father had left him, discovered he was standing on the shore with the power to command the tide. He worked with a chilling, detached focus. This wasn't about revenge, not in the hot-blooded sense. It was about balance. It was about correcting a fundamental error in the universe he inhabited. For 10 years, he had lived in a world where integrity was weakness and arrogance was strength. He was simply preparing to reveal the true nature of things. The preparations for their 10th anniversary party ran on a parallel track. Chloe was in her element, planning the most extravagant event of the social season. It was to be held in the gardens of their home, the very home Liam had designed. The theme, she declared, was a decade of diamonds, a not-so-subtle nod to their perceived prosperity and endurance. Caterers were flown in from New York, a famous string quartet was booked, and florists were tasked with transforming the garden into a glittering white wonderland. "It has to be perfect," Liam, she'd say, scrolling through swatches and menus on her tablet. "Everyone is going to be here. This isn't just a party, it's a statement. It's to show everyone that after 10 years we're stronger and more successful than ever. It will be." Liam would assure her, his calmness a deep, still pool that she mistook for passive agreement. The day before the party, Liam drove to Arthur Pembroke's office. The building was old, smelling of leather and aged paper, a sanctuary of quiet dignity. Arthur, his hair now completely white, his posture still ramrod straight, greeted him not with a handshake, but with a warm, paternal hand on his shoulder. "The final pieces are in place," Arthur said, leading him into the familiar, wood-paneled conference room. "The portfolios have been consolidated under the Phoenix Legacy Holding Company. The proxies have been secured. When you speak, you will be speaking with the authority of a majority shareholder in two of the three banks that hold Richard's primary loans." Liam nodded, his stomach a knot of cold resolve. "Thank you, Arthur, for everything, for your patience." "It was your father's patience I was honoring," Arthur corrected gently. He knew this day might come. He hoped it wouldn't. But he was a man who always prepared for structural weakness. He slid a single cream-colored envelope across the polished table. Liam's breath caught. It was the original. The paper was slightly yellowed with age, his name in his father's script as clear and steady as the day it was written. "Are you going to read it now?" Arthur asked. Liam looked at the letter, the symbolic object that had defined his marriage from its first fiery moments. He had imagined this for so long. What words it might contain. Words of comfort, of warning, of financial instruction. He placed his hand over it, feeling the crispness of the paper. Then he slid it back toward Arthur. "No," he said, a surprising certainty in his voice. "Not yet. My father wanted me to read it with my wife. I was never able to do that. But tomorrow I'm going to read it to her." To all of them he paused. "I need to do this one last thing before I know what it says. I need to stand on my own foundation first, not his. Can you understand that?" A slow smile spread across Arthur's aged face. It was a smile of profound approval, of a teacher seeing his student finally grasp the essential lesson. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Liam," he said. "Your father would be so incredibly proud." Liam left the office with an empty briefcase in his hand and a weight in his soul that was at once heavy and liberating. That night, as the final preparations for the party swirled around him, he was an island of preternatural calm. Chloe, frantic about the placement of a floral arch, barely noticed his stillness. He walked through the garden as the sun went down, the same garden where his marriage had been christened with an act of destruction. He stood by the old oak tree, near the stone bench. The grass was lush and green, showing no sign of the scar it had borne 10 years ago. But he remembered. He looked up at the house, his house, its clean lines and wide windows glowing against the deepening twilight. He had designed it to be a place of light and honesty. It had become a gilded cage, a stage for a long-running play. But every play has a final act. The quiet before the storm was over. The guests would be arriving in a matter of hours. The stage was set, the script was written, and for the first time in 10 years, Liam felt ready to deliver his lines. The night of the party was a perfect, crystalline fabrication. The air was warm and still, scented with night-blooming jasmine and the expensive perfumes of the 200 guests. Fairy lights glittered in the trees, mimicking a sky heavy with stars. The string quartet played Vivaldi, their notes a civilized, elegant veneer over the raw ambition and social maneuvering that pulsed beneath the surface of the crowd. Chloe was radiant, a queen in her element. She wore a couture gown shimmering with what looked like diamond dust, and around her neck, the necklace her father had given her 5 years ago. She moved through the party, her laughter bright and certain, her hand in the crook of Liam's arm. To everyone, they were the picture of a power couple. Her, the vibrant, charismatic socialite, and him, the handsome, steady, silent partner. "Isn't it perfect?" she whispered to him, squeezing his arm. "Look at everyone. The Jennings, the Vanderbilts, even Senator Croft came." Daddy pulled some strings. Liam nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw it all with a new, painful clarity. These weren't friends, they were assets. Each conversation was a transaction, an exchange of status and influence. He spotted Arthur Pembroke standing quietly near the back, looking out of place in his simple, well-worn suit, a lone island of substance in a sea of style. Their eyes met for a brief second, a silent exchange of confirmation. Everything was ready. Richard Hartwell held court near the champagne fountain, his voice a jovial roar that cut through the polite murmur of the party. He clapped men on the back, kissed women on the cheek, a feudal lord surveying his loyal subjects. He kept casting proud, possessive glances at Chloe and the party she had orchestrated. Liam endured the pleasantries, the empty congratulations on his anniversary. 10 years, you're a lucky man, Liam. One of Richard's associates slurred, clapping him on the shoulder, bagged the queen of the ball. Liam simply smiled, a polite, enigmatic smile that gave nothing away. He was a ghost at his own celebration, waiting for his moment to become real. The moment came as planned, after the main course had been cleared. Richard, holding a flute of champagne, tapped a knife against the crystal. The clear, ringing sound calling for silence. The quartet faded out. A hush fell over the garden. "Friends, family," Richard began, his face flushed with wine and pride. He stood on a small temporary stage set up for the occasion. "Welcome. Tonight, we celebrate a decade of love and partnership. A decade of my beautiful daughter, Chloe, and her husband, Liam." He paused, and a polite smattering of applause rippled through the crowd. "When Chloe first brought Liam home," Richard continued, a mischievous twinkle in his eye, "I'll admit I had my doubts. A quiet architect, a dreamer, I'm a man of action, of concrete and steel. He was a man of, well, paper and pencils." A wave of knowing laughter led by Chloe washed over the guests. Liam stood perfectly still, his face impassive. This was the list of grievances, being read aloud by the perpetrator himself. "But he's a good boy," Richard boomed, his tone dripping with condescension. "He loves my daughter, and he's learned a thing or two from being around the Hartwell way of doing things. He's even drawing up the plans for our new family legacy, the Hartwell estates. Give him a hand." More applause, this time for Liam. It felt like being petted. He could feel Chloe's hand on his back, urging him to smile, to look grateful. Richard raised his glass. So to Chloe, for her impeccable taste in parties and eventually in men, and to Liam for marrying up and having the good sense to stick around. To 10 years. To 10 years, the crowd echoed. Chloe then took the stage. She was glowing, her speech full of light-hearted jabs and affectionate stories that, to Liam's ears, all had the same subtext. He was the quiet, stable ground from which her star could shine. "He keeps me grounded," she finished, blowing him a kiss, "while Daddy and I build the castles in the sky. I couldn't do it without my rock. I love you, darling." And then, it was his turn. Chloe gestured for him to come up, to say a few words. "Just thank everyone, honey," she whispered as he passed. "Keep it short and sweet." As Liam walked towards the stage, a subtle shift occurred. His posture, usually relaxed and slightly accommodating, straightened. His steps, usually quiet, were now deliberate, measured. He didn't look like the good boy Richard had described. He looked like a man about to take ownership of the room. He reached the microphone. The garden was silent, expectant. He looked out over the sea of faces, the glittering diamonds, the champagne flutes, and his gaze settled on Chloe, her smile bright and encouraging, and Richard, looking pleased with himself. "Thank you, Richard, Chloe," he began, his voice calm and clear, amplified by the speakers so that it filled every corner of the garden. It was a voice no one there had ever really heard before. A voice of quiet, unshakable authority. "Richard is right," he continued, turning slightly to face his father-in-law. "When we first met, I was a man of paper. And tonight, I'd like to talk about a particular piece of paper. It was a letter from my father. He gave it to me to be read on my wedding day 10 years ago." A flicker of confusion, then alarm in Chloe's eyes. Richard's smile tightened at the edges. "It was a piece of paper that I treasured," Liam said, his gaze now locked on his wife. "But Chloe, in her wisdom, felt it was best to start our new life unburdened by the past, so she burned it." A collective, soft gasp went through the crowd. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable tension. Chloe's face went pale beneath her perfect makeup. "She burned the letter right here in this garden." Liam's voice was not angry, but devastatingly factual. "She thought she was burning a memory, a sentiment, a bridge to an old life. She was mistaken. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He reached down and picked up the sleek, leather briefcase he had placed by the lectern. The click of the latch's opening was unnaturally loud in the silence. "You see," he said, his eyes never leaving Chloe's horrified face, "my wife is a creature of magnificent surfaces. She appreciates the facade, the polish, the presentation. My father, on the other hand, was a man of foundations. He understood redundancy. He understood the importance of a backup. He understood that a man's true character is not what he shows the world, but what he builds in secret." From the briefcase, he did not pull out a letter. He pulled out a thick, bound portfolio, its cover emblazoned with a simple, elegant logo, a stylized bird rising from flames. "Chloe used to joke about my little blueprints," Liam said, his voice resonating with a decade of suppressed truth. "She and Richard often laughed about my little company, Phoenix Legacy Designs. They found it quaint." He opened the portfolio on the lectern. "What they failed to appreciate is that some of the strongest structures have the quietest facades." He began to speak, and the world that Chloe and Richard had built began to dissolve. "Phoenix Legacy Designs, my little company, has over the past 10 years anonymously funded and built 17 public libraries, 6 community health clinics, and the entire west wing of the Children's Hope Center," Liam stated, his voice ringing with clarity. The guests murmured, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. He turned a page. "But that is just its passion. Its business is something else entirely." He looked directly at Richard Hartwell. "My father was not just a civil engineer. He was a profoundly gifted investor who believed in silence and substance over noise and spectacle. He left me not a letter of sentiment, but a portfolio of such staggering scale that I have spent 10 years learning to manage it." He gestured with the portfolio towards the assembled crowd. "The venture capital firm that funded half of the tech startups you are all invested in? That's a subsidiary of my holding company. The charitable foundation that Senator Croft just praised in his last newsletter? I am its sole benefactor. The international bank that holds the primary mortgage on this very house and on the Hartwell Tower downtown and holds the majority of the debt for Hartwell properties." He paused, letting the question hang in the air, a guillotine suspended. He looked at Richard, whose face had gone from ruddy and confident to a pasty, slack-jawed gray. "I am its new majority shareholder," Liam said, the words landing like stones in a silent pool, as of 9 a.m. yesterday morning. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. It was the sound of a universe being remade. Chloe stared at him, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that was far beyond mere social embarrassment. This was an extinction-level event for her world. "You're lying," Richard sputtered, taking an unsteady step forward. "This is a joke, a sick, twisted joke." Liam's expression remained calm, almost sorrowful. "A man like you, Richard, only understands one language, so let me speak it." He pulled a single sheet of paper from the portfolio. "This is a consolidated statement of the assets held by the Phoenix Legacy Trust. The current valuation is approximately 9 times the peak valuation of the entire Hartwell Properties portfolio. And unlike your company, it carries 0 debt." He then turned to his wife, his beautiful, stunned wife. "For 10 years, Chloe, I have lived in your world. I have played the part of the grateful, simple man you and your father wanted me to be. I watched you value diamonds over devotion, status over substance. I waited. I hoped that somewhere underneath the Hartwell polish, there was a glimmer of the woman I thought I married." He reached back into the briefcase, and this time he pulled out the cream-colored envelope. It looked small and unassuming after the bombshells he had just dropped. "The letter my father wrote was a test," Liam said, his voice softening, filled with a decade of grief. "A final directive. He instructed me to share my life with a partner who valued what was inside the letter more than what was outside. He asked me to find a partner who understood that a foundation of love and respect is the only thing worth building on. The financial inheritance, all of this," he gestured to the portfolio, "it was all contingent on that, on me finding a true partner." He looked at Chloe, and for the first time she saw not her quiet, malleable husband, but a stranger, a man who held the power to unmake her. "You burned a copy, Chloe," he said softly. "You burned a test, and you failed it spectacularly. And in doing so, you burned down the future you thought you were securing. You thought you were burning a bridge to my past. In reality, you were burning the bridge to your own future." He held up the letter. "This is the original. This is the key, the deed, the testament. And for the first time, in front of all of you, I am finally going to read what my father wrote." He didn't look at her face as he began to open the sealed flap. He didn't need to. He could feel the shockwaves of his revelation rolling through the crowd, the frantic whispers, the dawning comprehension. He could feel the entire, glittering, hollow world of Hartwell Properties trembling on its foundations of sand. about to be washed away by the tide he had so patiently, so silently commanded. The party was over. The accounting had begun. The garden, once a stage for celebration, was now a silent courtroom. The fairy lights that had seemed so magical now cast a harsh, interrogative glare on the faces of the guests. Chloe stood frozen, a statue of shattered pride, her diamond-dusted dress a mockery of the ruin that had just descended upon her. Richard Hartwell, a man accustomed to being the largest presence in any room, seemed to have visibly shrunk. His face was a ghastly shade, his blustering confidence utterly gone, replaced by the raw, primal fear of a king who has just been deposed in a single devastating speech. What do you want, Liam?" Chloe finally whispered, the words barely audible. It was the question of a person who has only ever known transactions, who believes everything has a price. She was trying to find the angle, the negotiation, the way back from the abyss. Liam looked at her, and the anger he had suppressed for a decade was gone, replaced by a vast, weary sadness. "What I wanted, Chloe, was a partner, a wife. What I wanted was for you to see me, not my potential net worth, not my quaint job, but me, the man who loved you." He let that hang in the air, then turned his attention to Richard. "As for what I want from you, Richard, nothing. That's the point. I don't need your approval. I don't need your opportunity. And as of Monday morning, your company will find that its primary lenders are reevaluating their exposure to high-risk, over-leveraged real estate ventures." A choked sound escaped Richard's throat. This was a death sentence, and he knew it. Without the constant flow of credit, his House of Cards empire would collapse in on itself. "You can't," Richard gasped, taking a stumbling step forward. "The contracts, the agreements." From the back of the crowd, a calm voice cut through the tension. "The agreements are all perfectly standard, Richard. And they all contain clauses regarding material changes and financial oversight." Arthur Pembroke had stepped forward, his presence radiating a quiet, unimpeachable authority. He stood beside Liam, a silent ally revealed. "I've reviewed them myself. Everything your son-in-law has stated is factual and legally sound." Richard's eyes darted from Liam to Arthur and back again, the frantic look of a trapped animal. His gaze then fell upon his daughter, and a flicker of his old arrogance returned, twisted now into a desperate command. "Chloe, do something. Talk to your husband." Chloe turned to Liam, her eyes swimming with tears. But they weren't the tears of remorse. They were the tears of a terrified child who had just had her favorite toy taken away. "Liam, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "We can fix this. I didn't understand. I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. But I love you. I do." Liam met her gaze, and for a moment he searched for any sign of genuine contrition, any hint that she understood the nature of her failure, which was a failure of character, not of calculation. He found none. Her plea was for the life she was losing, not for the man she had never truly seen. This was the moment for the moral mirror. "Did you love me, Chloe?" he asked, his voice gentle but mercilessly precise. "When you laughed with your father as he called my work little shacks for birds? Did you love me when you dismissed the gift I poured my heart into because your father gave you something more expensive? Did you love me when you stood by for 10 years and let him call me a charity case that you had charitably taken in?" Each question was a soft, devastating blow. Chloe flinched with each one, having no answer because the only truthful answer was no. "You didn't love me." Liam stated, not as an accusation but as a quiet final verdict. "You loved the idea of me, the quiet, appreciative husband who made you look magnanimous. You loved your status as my keeper. You never, not once, tried to understand the foundation of the man you married. You were too busy admiring the facade." He looked down at the envelope in his hand. "This letter, it was my last hope for you, I thought. If you could just understand what you destroyed." He trailed off. He realized now that even if she had read it, she wouldn't have understood its value. Desperation made Chloe reckless. "Then let's read it now," she cried, lunging for the letter. "Together, like we were supposed to. We can start over." Liam held it just out of her reach, his motion calm and firm. The exact opposite of her own action 10 years ago. The parallel was so perfect, so poetically just, that a few of the guests audibly gasped. "No, Chloe," he said, his voice imbued with a finality that broke through her hysteria. "That chance was burned away a long time ago. This is something I have to do for myself." He turned away from her, from Richard, from the wreckage of their shared life, and faced the stunned crowd. With steady hands, he broke the seal of the 10-year-old envelope. The sound was a soft, satisfying rip, a severing of the final tie. He unfolded the single sheet of paper. His father's handwriting was as he remembered, strong, clear, and economical. He began to read aloud. "My dearest Liam," he began, his voice thick with emotion for the first time that night. "If you are reading this with your new wife, then I have hope. I have hope that you have found a partner who understands that the measure of a person is not the height of their buildings, but the strength of their foundations. I have left you a great deal of money. It is a burden as much as a gift. It can build or it can corrupt. It can free you or it can imprison you. The choice is not in how you spend it, but in how you value it. I pray your wife understands this. I pray she sees that this wealth is a tool, not a trophy. It is a legacy of responsibility, not a claim to superiority. But Liam, my son, know this. This fortune is nothing. It is paper. It is numbers on a screen. The only true inheritance I have to give you is the lesson I have tried to teach you your whole life. Integrity is the only material that can withstand the test of time. Love is the only structure that is truly worth building. Character is the only blueprint that matters. If the woman you have married values these things, if she values the heart of the man who is reading this letter over the contents of his bank account, which this letter legally transfers to you both, then you have found a treasure beyond any price. Build your life together on that rock. If she does not, then my son, I am sorry. I am sorry for the pain you will endure. But know that you have the strength to tear it all down and build again on your own terms. Your foundation is strong. I made sure of it. With all my love, your father. A profound silence filled the garden as Liam finished reading. Tears were streaming down his face, but his voice had not wavered. The letter was not a contract. It was a blessing, it was a warning, it was a final, loving gift of faith in his son's character. He carefully folded the letter and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket over his heart. He looked at Chloe one last time. Her face was a mask of utter devastation. She finally understood. Not the lesson, but the loss. She had not just failed a test. She had renounced a treasure, and she had done it for the cheap thrill of asserting a dominance she never truly had. Liam turned to Arthur. "Let's go," he said softly. Without another word, Liam and his father's loyal friend walked off the stage, through the stunned and silent crowd and away from the glittering ruins of his first marriage. He didn't look back. He was an architect, and he had a new life to build from the foundation up. The week that followed the party was one of deafening silence. Liam moved out of the house he had designed and into a simple, elegant apartment downtown overlooking a park. He had Arthur's firm send over a single box of his things, his books, his father's photograph, and the mahogany jewelry box he had made for Chloe. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the life they had built, was a part of the facade, and he left it behind without a second thought. The fallout in the Hartwell world was swift and catastrophic. As Liam had predicted, the banks, now under his new quiet influence, called in their loans. Richard Hartwell's empire, built on bravado and credit, crumbled like a structure with no rebar. The news of his financial collapse spread through their social circle like a virus, and the same people who had laughed at his jokes and accepted his hospitality now crossed the street to avoid him. His power had been an illusion, maintained by the collective belief in his wealth. Once that was gone, there was nothing left. Chloe called Liam over and over. Her first calls were hysterical, filled with pleas and promises. "We can go to counseling, Liam. I can change. I see it now. I really do." He didn't answer. He let the calls go to voicemail, listening to them once not out of indecision, but to confirm his diagnosis. Her pleas were not for him, but for a return to the life she had lost. She was a patient describing symptoms, not a person seeking a cure for the disease of her own character. Then the calls turned angry, accusatory. "You humiliated me. You destroyed my father. You're a monster, a cold, calculating snake." This, he knew, was her trying to reshape the narrative, to cast herself as the victim. It was the only coping mechanism she had. Finally, the calls stopped. He heard through Arthur that she had moved in with her parents, who had been forced to sell the great Hartwell estate and move into a much smaller, less impressive home in a less fashionable suburb. The Hartwell Legacy Estates project was dead, the land seized by the creditors. Liam, meanwhile, was experiencing a profound sense of peace. The weight of his double life was gone. He no longer had to wear the mask of the ineffectual husband. He could be himself, fully and completely. His work at Phoenix Legacy Designs flourished. Freed from the need to hide, he took on larger, more ambitious projects. He began designing a new headquarters for his own company, a building that would be a landmark of sustainable architecture, with a public atrium, a free art gallery, and a rooftop garden open to the city. About a month after the party, he received a formal, legal-looking envelope. It was from Chloe's lawyers. She had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Liam smiled sadly. Even in this, she couldn't be honest. The difference was not irreconcilable. It was fundamental. They had simply been building two different lives all along. He instructed Arthur to be generous in the settlement. "She's not to be left destitute," Liam said firmly. "Set up a trust. It should be enough for her to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. Enough to get a degree or start a small business. Enough for a new foundation, if she chooses to build one." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "After everything, you're still trying to give her a chance." My father's letter wasn't just about her, Arthur, Liam explained. It was about me. What kind of man do I want to be? I don't want to be Richard Hartwell, a man who crushes those he deems beneath him. I want to be a man who builds. Maybe she'll waste it. Maybe she'll use it to buy more shiny things. But the choice, for the first time in her life, will be entirely her own. That's the most I can do for her. The divorce was quiet and uncontested. Liam signed the papers in Arthur's office. As he put the pen down, he felt a final definitive release. A 10-year chapter of his life was over. He spent the next few months immersing himself in his work and rediscovering himself. He traveled, not to the lavish resorts Chloe had favored, but to see the great architectural wonders of the world, the ancient temples of Kyoto, the soaring cathedrals of Europe, the ingenious designs of Scandinavian modernism. He filled sketchbooks with ideas, not for clients but for himself. He also found himself reconnecting with the small, simple joys he had long forgone. He spent weekends volunteering at a local youth center, teaching kids the basics of design and model building. He found that sharing his passion without any expectation of profit or acclaim was more fulfilling than any financial return. One Saturday, while working with a group of teenagers on a model for a new playground, a woman approached him. She was the director of the center, a woman named Sarah with warm, intelligent eyes and sawdust on her jeans. "You're Liam," she said. "It wasn't a question. I've been hearing about you. The kids think you're some kind of superhero." Liam laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound. "Hardly. I just know how to use a glue gun." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working," she said, gesturing to the rapt faces of the kids. "They've never been this engaged. Thank you." They fell into an easy conversation about the project, about the neighborhood, about the challenges of nonprofit work. He found himself speaking openly, without filtering his thoughts, without the need for subtext or strategy. He told her about his firm and its focus on community projects. "Phoenix Legacy Design," she said, a thoughtful look on her face. "I've heard of you. You did the new wing at Children's Hope. My nephew was treated there. It's a beautiful space. It doesn't feel like a hospital. It feels hopeful." The simple, honest compliment landed in his heart with more weight than any award or glowing review. "Thank you," he said, the words full of a gratitude he hadn't felt in a very long time. "That's all I've ever wanted my work to be." They talked for another hour until the kids had packed up and the center was closing. As he was leaving, Sarah stopped him. "I know this is forward," she said, a slight blush on her cheeks, "but we're having a fundraiser next month, a very low-key non-gala event. We'll probably be serving chili in paper bowls. But I'll be there. And I was wondering if you'd like to be there too." Liam looked at her open, genuine face, and he felt the first tentative shoots of a new beginning. There was no strategy here, no hidden agenda, just a simple, human connection. "I'd like that very much," he said, and the smile that spread across his face was real, and it was his own. 6 months after the anniversary party that had become a day of reckoning, Liam stood on a windy overlook. The plans for the new Phoenix Legacy headquarters spread out on the hood of his car. The site was an old, abandoned industrial lot that had been a blight on the neighborhood for decades. He had bought it for a fraction of its potential value because no one else had the vision to see what it could become. The building he had designed was audacious. It was a soaring structure of glass, steel, and living green walls powered entirely by renewable energy, with a water recycling system that would feed the public gardens surrounding it. It was a statement not of wealth but of possibility. It was the architectural embodiment of his father's letter. He heard the crunch of gravel as a car pulled up behind him. He didn't need to turn around. He recognized the sound of the engine. It was Sarah. "Chasing the sunset?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. She handed him a cup of coffee from a thermos. "Trying to see where the shadows will fall," he replied. A technical answer that was also the truth of his life for the past year. She looked at the blueprints, then at the desolate lot, then back at the blueprints. She didn't see an empty space. She saw what he saw. "It's going to be magnificent," she said softly. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The wind whipped a loose page from the blueprints and it cartwheeled across the gravel. Without a word, they both bent to catch it, their hands brushing. A small, simple spark of electricity. "I heard about your ex-wife," Sarah said, her voice gentle, her eyes on the horizon. "A friend of a friend works in the art gallery where she just got a job, as an assistant." Liam was silent for a moment, processing the information. Chloe, who had never worked a day in her life, was now cataloging art, fetching coffee, living a life of ordinary employment. The trust he had set up for her was enough to live on, but he had been clear with Arthur. It was not enough for a life of leisure. It was seed money for a new life, not funding for the old one. "I hope she finds what she's looking for," Liam said, and he was surprised to find that he meant it. His anger had long since cooled, leaving behind not bitterness, but a kind of detached pity. Her punishment was not poverty, but relevance. She had been forced to become a person, not a presence. And your ex-father-in-law? Sarah asked, more hesitantly. Richard? Last I heard, he's a consultant, Liam said, the word carrying its own weight. He lost everything. The houses, the company, the respect he commanded. He's a ghost haunting the clubs he can no longer afford to be a member of. His punishment is memory. He has to live every day with the knowledge of what he had and how he lost it. It was a poetic justice, a consequence directly proportional to the sin. Richard's sin was pride, and his pride was all he had left, now a hollow, rattling thing. Chloe's sin was a worship of status, and she was now forced to live without it. Liam turned to Sarah, the last rays of sunlight catching the warmth in her eyes. But that's their story, he said. It's not mine anymore. He began to roll up the blueprints. His story was here on this empty lot, in the ambitious lines on the paper, in the quiet, shared warmth of the woman standing beside him. His father's test had been brutal. It had cost him 10 years of his life, living in the shadow of a lie. But it had also forged him. It had taught him the difference between the appearance of strength and the reality of it. It had forced him to build his own foundation, separate from the fortune he had inherited. He had passed the test, not by pleasing his father, but by becoming the man his father had always hoped he would be. Come on, he said to Sarah, taking her hand. Her fingers curled around his. A perfect, natural fit. Let's go get some of that chili you promised. I have some ideas for the playground, and I want to show you the sketches. As they walked to her car, Liam glanced back at the city skyline, now glittering with thousands of lights. He was no longer just a man who designed buildings. He was a man who had reclaimed his own life, raised it to the foundation, and was now building something new, something true, something that was finally beautifully his own. The letter was in a frame on his desk now, a reminder not of a test, but of a truth. The only legacy that truly matters is the one you build with love, integrity, and a hand to hold as you watch the sunset. So what do you think? Was Liam's 10-year wait an act of incredible patience or a cold, calculated plan for revenge? We all face moments where our values are tested. How we react defines who we are. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in Liam's position. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found this story of vindication and new beginnings satisfying, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us that true worth is never on the surface. We have many more tales to tell.